Taking control of your menopause journey, getting the menopause care you deserve in 2026. We are joined by our incredible guest speaker today, double board certified gynecologist and certified menopause practitioner, Dr. Anna Barbieri. I'm really excited to introduce Anna and talk about all of her incredible accomplishments and expertise. But we do have, before we dive in, we do have a couple of just organizational and housekeeping items, which I'm going to run through at the top before we really dive in. So, welcome. I'm Alessandra Henderson. I am the Senior Program Advisor to Let's Talk Menopause. Let's Talk Menopause is a national nonprofit changing the conversation on menopause so women get the information they need and the health care they deserve in midlife and beyond. We host these menopause talks on a monthly basis. They're central to our education efforts to ensure that we are working with top experts about the topics that are most important to our growing community. And if you like what you see here today, we do have a rich library of over 35 other talks on our website, everything from hot flashes to weight gain to metabolic health, heart health, whatever it might be. So please check it out. A reminder that these talks are for informational purposes only. They're not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And a huge thank you to our sponsor, Bayer. Just a couple more housekeeping before we dive in. One, we have disabled the chat and are only using it to provide you with relevant links. But if you have a question, which we really encourage you to ask, we have the Slido app, which you should see a prompt on the right side of your screen inviting you to participate. A reminder that we'll do our best to answer your questions, but we appreciate if we don't get to yours, and please try to not ask too specific medical questions. It's really hard to answer. Think about this as a collective whole of what might be relevant to others. There'll be a brief survey at the end, and we are recording this, and you'll receive a copy of the recording. Whew. Okay. So on to why we're all here today. I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Anna Barbieri, again, a double board certified gynecologist, integrative medicine physician, and certified menopause practitioner who's passionate about delivering personalized patient-centered care. She is the founder of Anna Barbieri Medical, an integrative women's health practice in New York City. She also serves as the clinical strategy leader at the Carolyn Rowan Center for Women's Health and Wellness at Mount Sinai. Last but not least, she is also the founding physician of Electra Health, where I've had the privilege of building alongside her for 5+ years. She is brilliant, she is thoughtful, she is patient first, and I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you. So welcome, Dr. Barbieri, or Anna. I might call you Anna.
So let's go with Anna. Alessandra. Thank you so much for inviting me. Like you said, we've been working together for quite a few years. We share
Yeah,
this passion about women's hormonal health in general, and menopause in particular. So I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you.
amazing. So maybe let's just start. I know this, but would love to hear, oops, let me fix my camera a little. Would love to hear about your path into women's health and specifically menopause. Would love to hear your care philosophy and path into women's health.
Sure. So, hi everyone, and again, thank you for being here. So I have been in women's health and specifically in obstetrics and gynecology for, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's been 23 years this year since I finished my residency in OBGYN. I landed in that field not actually knowing that I would end up in it, but I am one of these very fortunate souls that found a calling literally within 48 hours of being exposed to women's health in medical school. And once I started my rotation in OBGYN way back when, there was no turning back. And I really feel to this day, even though certainly my life, my health, my own health transitions as a woman have evolved, and my professional life has evolved. I am just incredibly fortunate and feel so passionate about this field. There's so much that has been done within it, so much that has been improved, but so much more that we can do and work on. And menopause and kind of women's hormonal health have really been a major chapter in my professional life in the last, let's say, 10 years. So, full disclosure, I am myself 52. Up until about 10 years ago, and this is, I really can't believe, and I think Alessandra, we've had conversations on this topic too. The landscape of menopause and the conversation around it has really developed so much and has changed, but that wasn't the case then. So, full disclosure, 10 years ago, I was a practicing OBGYN that was a little bit out of the box with my interest in more holistic medicine. But even as a practicing OBGYN, I did not know much about menopause. And this is one of the things that are changing that we still need to work on, and that is education and awareness of women in general and of providers in particular. So 10 years ago, I'm stringing along, busy, doing all my things and delivering babies and handling everything that we all need to handle in life. And perimenopause hit me like a truck. And like a truck that I didn't even know was a truck. I had no idea what was happening. So between brain fog and fatigue and forgetting things and not being able to handle myself on a daily basis, I went straight to my theory that I probably had some awful thing like a brain tumor. So I ended up with a neurology consult, only to learn on my own that what I was really experiencing was perimenopause. And that was happening at a time where many of my patients were getting into the same age range. So I found that I was really didn't really have the tools or the information to help my patients or even help myself. So it was a pretty rapid evolution into somebody who now spends most of her time on women's hormonal health and really not only cares for women one-on-one, but now I'm really passionate about really working on structural change in this sector. We need better education, we need more awareness, we need more access, and we need better organized and more effective care. So that's why I'm so interested in being here, so grateful for this opportunity. So grateful also to Mount Sinai for having me as their strategy lead on a major effort that we're leading there. And I'm really hoping that as much change as has happened in the last 10 years in this space can be multiplied many a time in the next 10.
Yeah. And I remember that when we first connected many years ago, 10 years ago, like you said, of even working in the space. And I don't mean to say catastrophizing, but like you said, getting a brain scan and thinking the worst, right? When in fact it was with, I'm not going to say simple, but with some hormonal health care and attention and expertise, you can get kind of get on the path that you need. So
And I remember the
appreciate.
day you called me and asked me if I wanted to do something in menopause, and I think my answer was hell yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And now the landscape has changed. And so I'm so
Yes.
excited. And there are so many women here. So diving in and really just the arc of this talk, wherever you are in your journey, whomever's listening, you are right where you need to be because we're at the start of a new year. We can take action, and there are many paths into to this care, but it is there, and we everyone deserves to get the support that they need. So today, yeah, the kind of the arc of this, we're going to talk about, when to start, how to find a doctor, how to maximize your visit, and just expectation setting over the course of your menopause journey. So maybe if we could start by diving in with really, how early is it to seek menopause? When's the right time to book a visit? There are women, and I read an article, it was a Bustle article about how, one of the fastest growing um, segments of folks seeking menopause care are actually women in their 30s who are starting to plan ahead. So maybe if we could just start with when is the right time across various either decades or stages.
For sure. And I think before I dive into this, I assume we have a national audience. So a lot of this will
Yes.
also
Yes.
have to do with the healthcare system that we work within in the US. And there are different ways and approaches and different centers and strategies. So we'll try to be pretty flexible. But I think most of us are more familiar with the typical way that healthcare is delivered, which leaves a lot to be desired, of course. So we'll talk a little bit maybe about what would be ideal, but also how to work within what we have right now.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so I think one of the first kind of important tenets of hormonal hair care and perimenopausal and menopausal care is really awareness and education. And it's kind of like puberty. right? So this is how I talk to my patients about this issue quite a bit. Like we know that puberty doesn't happen over time, overnight, and neither does the transition of perimenopause and menopause. And in fact, it can take up to a decade. But we wouldn't talk to a mom of a 5-year-old about puberty. However, we wouldn't wait until someone is 15 or 14 to talk about puberty. And we actually do a much better job with that phase of life in terms of setting expectations and doing some education than with perimenopause and menopause. So to me, because the average age, if we just roll the clock back a little bit, because the average age at our last period is about somewhere between 50 to 52, and perimenopause can last about a decade. I do think that late 30s to early 40s, and if we want to get very specific, let's just take the big sort of birthday milestone of 40 would be a great time to start either learning about this transition to gain a little bit of awareness and education before symptoms set in. So we have an idea of what's happening, why it's happening, and what we can do. Um, and not waiting too long into this time period until symptoms are terrible and start, because we can do things so we don't have to suffer through it.
Mhm. Yeah, I can't tell you. I'm squarely in the perimenopause cohort of, early to mid 40s right now. And the big question is like, is it perimenopause? Is it, fill in, is it aging? Is
Yeah,
it fill in the
right. And
blank?
it's hard to parse it out. And I do think, I do think there are some exceptions to even what we just said. There are women who are facing, certain medical treatments that can put them into menopause. There are women facing surgery and ovarian removal. And if that's
Mhm.
happening to somebody at 25, that is the right time. If somebody has a family history of, let's say, premature menopause or even early menopause, and those are
Mhm.
defined at less than 40, less than 45, then we've got to move that, that time a little bit earlier. But I would say late 30s to early 40s, with maybe the milestone 40 birthday
Yeah,
of 40 being the time to broach that discussion.
great. And if you're in your 50s or 60s, it is never too late. It's only, the time is now. Most women wait until symptoms become unbearable because we are taking care of everyone else. But this is again the call to action right now of seeking care. So, what are the speaking of, what are the types of menopause care options?
Yeah, so menopause care can be delivered with many, many different types of people and providers. I think menopause care, some aspects of it, honestly, can be delivered by our friends. Part of menopause self-care is actually being able to talk about what's happening to us with people in our own personal circle. And I think some, and things are changing here. I do think for a long time, women were simply too ashamed and afraid to talk about it, even with people closest to us. So having a group of trusted friends or family members where we can be ourselves and talk about this is already part of menopause care. Now, when we're talking about rendering medical care for menopause, this landscape is very varied and multi-layered
Yeah.
also. Traditionally, menopause care has been delivered mostly by providers and particularly physicians within the field of OBGYN. I have a little bit of a different view on this, even as an OBGYN, because menopause is a universal experience for women, right? Like, as long as we all live long enough, all of us will go through this transition. And menopause is not just about our periods, and it's not just about hot flashes, and it's not just about hormone therapy. And because perimenopause and menopause are kind of these full body and mind experiences, I actually think that all physicians and providers who take care of women in this phase should be at least somewhat familiar with it. So traditionally, yes, we can obtain menopause care from OBGYNs. Primary care physicians are becoming much more aware of the need to provide care in this area. PAs and Ps, but you also have Now physicians in the areas of psychiatry that are becoming more familiar with the specific needs of midlife women. Um, Dietitians and nutritionists are becoming much more aware of this. Physical therapists, because of certain joint issues and musculoskeletal issues that are more common in midlife. So I do think we can access care in through many layers, but as far as providers, it's going to be typically OBGYN, primary care, endocrinology. The provider credential may look different. Certainly, MDs will be able to provide this care, but there are excellent nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And then the extra layer of credentialing is being certified by the Menopause Society, which is our national organization that provides this recognition. And basically, it means that a Menopause Society certified provider has demonstrated current knowledge of evidence-based management protocols and options for women in midlife. And that credential can be extended to lots of different types of providers. So again, nurse practitioners, DOs, MDs, and so
Yeah.
on. Midwives, yeah.
It's wonderful to see the number of people who are or physicians that are reading up on it. Um, so in parsing through this, um, should a woman bring this up at her annual visit with her? Like, what is perhaps if you're starting to see symptoms, you want to take action, what would you say is the first port of call? And is that part of your annual visit, or is it a separate path?
Yeah, so if you look at the quote unquote annual visit and the type of that visit and the duration of that visit that the annual is, which in a typical practice is going to be about 15 minutes. And there's even statistics on this that in a typical medical 15 minute visit on the schedule, there's only half of that time that's spent directly with a provider. There is no way that something like your hormonal health and specifically perimenopause and menopause can be discussed in that time frame. That visit is typically focused on prevention, cancer screening, physical exam. I really don't think it's enough time. And I think it behooves us, even as women, to put a little bit more emphasis and importance on this topic. So I think it's a great time to say, hey, I'd like to, talk about perimenopause or menopause, but I think that topic deserves its own time and its own visit.
That's great. Bringing it up, being proactive, getting it on your record, but then kind of seeking the additional care you need. If we could talk a little bit about some of the online platforms that are coming up, right? How do you think about um, assessing that or incorporating that as part of the options?
Yeah. So I think, one of the big problems in the landscape of menopause care was lack of access. Again, fortunately, that's changing, but especially for people that don't live in metropolitan areas or who just simply don't have access to a provider that's really familiar with this topic, online platforms have been really a major game changer. And I do think that there are a number that are really valid and provide excellent care. So I think as part of solving the access issue, the online platforms can really be very helpful. Personally, I think it's hard for an online menopause platform to function in a vacuum, and our health doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I think having an online platform is a good component of care, but not as a standalone. This time in life, especially our 40s and 50s, even from a purely, let's say, gynecologic point of view, brings about a lot of change. And the pendulum is swinging so far in the direction of conversation of perimenopause and menopause that sometimes we also assume that everything is just hormones where when other things can be happening. So in certainly the ideal world, I do think that a combination of online access, virtual care, but hands-on care also as needed would be ideal. So I certainly, even in our work on that virtual platform, I really advocate for a combination and women's ability to gain access to hands-on care when needed.
Okay. So this is all really helpful to paint the landscape. Donna, thank you, who is the co-founder and CEO of Let's Talk Menopause, is also aligned in the background and has been dropping into the chat. Let's Talk Menopause's tips for finding the care you deserve. So there are, whether you're researching through the Menopause Society, which you can enter your zip code and find a practitioner that's in your area, again, across multiple specialties, be it physical therapy all the way through to OB or MD. Um, so you can use those online tools for, like you said, that in-person visit. But in the absence of having someone local, um, incorporating some of these online platforms can be helpful. The last thing is, as women are, and then we'll move into preparing for a visit and maximizing your time once you've got someone. But I guess any green flags or red flags as you're researching, how do you drill into booking that appointment or finding that doctor that you
Yeah.
recommend?
Yeah, so I think, as far as green flags, certainly looking either at an office, a clinic, a center, or a virtual platform that is really transparent about how they provide care and how they look at menopause-related care and who the providers are. Menopause, while universal, is also a very individual experience. And one of my sort of core tenets of practice in this space is the acknowledgement of how individual and nuanced treatment can be, and what we know, what's evidence-based, and what we don't know. And I would be wary of any provider center clinic or platform that puts forward the sort of magic solution type of language. Even estrogen, as wonderful a tool as it can be, is not the magic bullet for everything that affects us in this phase. So I do think that, any, again, provider of care, no matter the name or type of center, that um, is transparent about how individualized and nuanced the care should be is already a green flag. I do think that credentialing and licensure provide sort of a verifiable way of, check off of green flags. And then a red flag would be, again, somebody who's promoting a single solution. All of our patients get estrogen, come here for your testosterone injections type of thing. I also think a relative red flag is a platform or a clinic that really promotes the sale of product. It is one thing to enable access to products and medications. It's another thing to really push that as the primary sort of care offering. So I really think we should be looking at obtaining care from providers who first listen to us, acknowledge individual physiology and individual philosophy, provide ongoing care rather than pushing products.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, so now let's move on to the visit. So you've got a, I'll say
Seven
doctor,
minutes.
the
Yeah.
short noun. You've got your doctor's visit on the calendar, or MD, and fill in the blank of who. You got the specialist visit on the horizon. Um, what do you like to see patients? What do you recommend patients doing, or as a provider, what is most helpful to maximize that time? Be it
Yes.
symptom tracking, research, medical records, just what should you walk in the door with?
Yes. So, three very simple things. And before we list them, I'll just say that there's my ideal world where everybody has at least an hour and everybody can, the patient and the provider can get to know each other and really tease out certain things. And it's going to be a beautiful ongoing relationship. And that's really ideal because I think, again, this, perimenopause and menopause can be evolving processes. And sometimes we need to try lots of different things to see what works for that individual person. But that is not the reality that most of us face. The reality is a 15-minute visit, of which only a few minutes may be spent with that provider. And we do need to work on that, but that's something that's going to change tomorrow. So number one, I think coming in with some information, and especially if you're in perimenopause and are still having cycles, menstrual cycles, but even somebody who is already postmenopausal, coming in with a little bit of symptom tracking. And, we said before that this hormonal process doesn't affect one organ system. It's a full body experience. So dividing these symptoms into buckets of how is my mood? How is my sleep? What is happening to my cycles? Am I having hot flashes? What's happening to my sexual health is very helpful for me as a provider to really understand what's happening with somebody. And I would drill down even more. I can't tell you how many people come in and say, I can't sleep. I wake up at 3 a.m. I want to know, can you sleep on Friday nights? I can sleep on Friday nights. That's the only night I sleep. Okay. The fact that I can sleep on Friday night like a baby probably means that a lot of my sleep issues have to do with my stress and not really necessarily with my hormones. But that's a helpful detail. Your libido, is your libido low all the time? Or only when you're home and working, but when you go on vacation, there's nothing wrong with your libido. That's a very helpful tidbit. Are you having mood issues only in certain parts of your cycle? And is there a time of your cycle where you actually feel great? That's a hugely important detail because it helps me figure out where someone feels best depending on the hormonal profile that I can associate with that phase in the cycle. So, symptom tracking for at least 2 to 3 months before that visit, super helpful. Number two would be really to kind of identify top 2 or 3 wishes of changing something. A lot of the time I'll see patients who come in and they say, I just want to feel like myself. And I can totally get that because I say that a lot. I used to say that a lot. And I understand that wish, but it's actually hard to figure out what that means because the tools we work with can be quite specific for certain reasons. So I will often ask a patient, out of all of these things, what are the 2 top things that we should start working on first? Is it joint pain? Is it sleep? Is it hot flashes? Is it vaginal dryness? And some of them may have very simple answers, and some of them will have lots of options and kind of long-term planning. And then the third thing is, can I come in with some useful, concrete information? Maybe I've had lab results in the last 6 to 12 months. Even if those are not necessarily hormone levels, and that's a whole other conversation about checking hormone levels in perimenopause, but if somebody has had lab work, I'd love to see it. Some symptoms of perimenopause and menopause may be actually symptoms of another process. So if you've had any sort of evaluation, if you've had any sort of imaging, labs, I'd love to see that. So really kind of symptoms, any workup, concrete information, and then sort of symptom and wish priority would be very helpful. And if I may add fourth, which to me as a kind of this more holistic practitioner, I'm also always very interested in someone's approach to their own care. Are you someone who is really interested in menopause hormone therapy, wants to really delve into that? That conversation could take us an hour. Or are you someone who's really coming in for information and is much more interested in learning about whether we can do something on our own and behaviorally
Yeah.
to feel better? It just helps to guide the conversation, make it much more efficient and effective in that time frame.
Yeah. And there's a lot of research that's happening outside of the doctor's office, right?
Yes.
Um, so I guess this is helpful. And so having all that in, as you walk through the door, what can a patient or a woman expect in the first visit in terms of the arc of it and what's either discussed or done?
So there is the ideal and then there is the usual.
Yeah.
Yes. I I do think that we should expect to be heard, to be to have the provider make an effort to understand us. And that's why I think to we do need to come prepared to that visit, but also come in with that expectation. I do think it's helpful to understand certain terms around perimenopause and menopause, and that information is online now. But as a provider, I repeat it again because I want to ensure that when I speak to a patient, we're speaking the same language and understand each other. I think it's reasonable to expect that a workup may be done, especially if symptoms are not clear-cut related to menopause. Someone with, for example, brain fog, hair loss, weight gain, can we, we should be able to consider something like thyroid dysfunction, B12 deficiency, for example, ferritin or iron deficiency. So I do think that workup, that's a more holistic workup, should be part of this conversation. And then a conversation about tools and strategies about how to feel better, focusing on the priority symptoms and on the preferred personal philosophy. So I usually divide that into buckets of what can we do behaviorally without any sort of prescription or stuff we take? Are there any more natural solutions? How are we looking at hormone therapy and in what order here? And are we looking at any prescription non-hormonal medications too? So it's
Okay.
really listening, partnership with the patient, partnership with your provider, workup, discussion of options, focusing on which option we're going to use and how we follow up with that.
Got it. I do see some questions here, which we will get to. I'm weaving it in because
Yeah.
we have them coming up. But really, just to you mentioned testing. Are hormone levels tested? Because we get this question a lot.
Yes, yes. So, okay. So I'm going to use my current favorite analogy that I use
Okay.
with patients, okay? And this has to do specifically with perimenopause. So what that means is that someone's hormones are changing away from predictable fluctuations in a menstrual cycle, but this person has not had a 12-month time period free of menstrual cycles. That is perimenopause. And the trick is, while we can at some point identify its end by looking back, right? So I had my period 18 months ago. I'm no longer in perimenopause. It is very hard to figure out when it starts because it can start in your late 30s. It can start sometimes earlier than that. I typically it's going to start on average in somebody going through a natural process early to mid 40s to late 40s. But it's hard to know. And when we are in perimenopause, especially its earlier phase, when cycles may still be pretty regular, but we can definitely have symptoms terrible PMS, mood changes, fatigue, sleep disruption, weight gain, hair loss, brain fog. Your hormone levels may not document that. It's going to be your experience that documents it. And my going back to this favorite analogy, testing your sex hormone levels, so let's say your estrogen, progesterone during that time, it's kind of like seeing what the temperature is on any given October day. It may still be October, but that temp may be 50 degrees or it may be 70. And
Yeah.
it's going to vary. So just because it's 50 degrees today doesn't mean it's going to be 70 tomorrow or 50 in 2 weeks. All we know is at the beginning of October, it's going to feel warmer than the end. But any given temperature number is not really going to give you that information. So I am not a big fan of routine sex hormone testing in perimenopause, except in certain circumstances, and there's a lot of exceptions to that. I do check androgen hormones, so I do check testosterone, something called DHEAS, but for sure, especially because certain common symptoms of perimenopause and menopause will be symptoms of cardiometabolic change and other hormonal changes. I do think it's really worthwhile, of course, unless somebody has had this done before, to look at things like your glucose metabolism, your lipid profile, check routine kidney, liver function tests. check certain markers of immunity, look at your level of ferritin or iron stores, look at your B12 level. I do look at vitamin D levels. So I do think that ideally we should be looking at a comprehensive lab picture with um, understanding that routinely checking your estrogen level in this phase is just not that helpful.
Okay. That's helpful
That's a very complicated and
no.
convoluted, yeah,
What
answer.
about if you're in menopause? So, or you're, for example, you haven't had a period in 10 months, right? That kind of thing. And I know that's still perimenopause. So, but I'm trying to give the
Yes.
lived experience of feeling like you're almost there, or you're postmenopause, where does hormone
Yeah.
thing fit in?
So this is where a lot of nuance comes in. I will sometimes check these levels because it will help me match someone's current symptoms to their hormonal profile then. And sometimes it can help us understand how to go about with the start of treatment and even certain predictions to treatment. And I know that sounds very, very vague, but in practice, what that looks like is answering the questions, do we start with estrogen? Do we start with progesterone or progestins only? Is this somebody that will likely get their period again or not? None of the results will be 100% accurate and predictive all the time, but there are many times where I do think that is helpful. Someone who hasn't had a period in 2 years and comes in and clearly has menopause-related symptoms and has had the other blood work done, I don't think it's that helpful to run an estrogen level. That estrogen level is going to be low. We know
Okay.
that it's not going to be helpful.
Yeah. Someone
Yeah.
asked quickly oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, in this country, healthcare is very expensive. So I really do believe in using tests and care in a way that is financially effective for people rather than sending tests that won't add much to the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone asked very quickly about the Dutch test. What are
Yes.
your thoughts on it?
Okay, so the Dutch test stands for Direct Urine Test of Complete Hormones. I do think that this test can provide sometimes useful information. I do not think this is a test that is routinely needed for women who are seeking menopause care. It is an expensive test. You can, I don't think it's necessary for everyone. I think there are, we can do serum, which is blood testing that's really been validated in circumstances where it's needed. So I think at this point, the Dutch test is not needed for routine menopause care, usually for everyone all the time. In
Okay.
my practice, I use it occasionally for select cases. Yeah.
Okay. So let's wrap up what this looks like. And we're talking, and I feel like the path or the journey so far has been symptom management, right? How do you come in and that, I want to feel like myself again. And then also excited to talk about what long-term menopause care looks like, because there are questions specifically around DEXA scans, some of the kind of the tests and long-term preventative healthcare,
Yes.
but staying on the symptom management um, path or train here, what can you expect to leave that first visit with? And what is the follow-up? What does ongoing menopause care look like
Yeah.
leaving the visit and in the coming months?
Yeah. So let me maybe frame it like this. I think ideally, perimenopause and menopause care should be a matrix of three different things that
Mm,
are going to look different for different individual. And the matrix is what tools am I going to use that I need my provider for? Hormone therapy, prescription medication, professional advice in the area, let's say, of nutrition or something like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That has a lot to do with symptom management. The second kind of part of this matrix is what are some behaviors or habits that I can engage in myself, meaning that require me to do something to feel better? Strength training, how much protein I'm eating, what sort of sleep habits am I using for myself every night? What am I doing to manage my own stress? All of that. And then the third part of this matrix, and I don't think we talk about that enough, is how do I, as an individual, view my own fact of my own aging, and how do I relate to this? And I think there is a lot of us, and I'll count myself in this group, like we are not happy with the fact that we're aging, that our bodies are changing. And for right now in 2026, this is an inevitable and normal process. So I do think that it's worth exploring what our own relationship to that is. So, and we leave the visit with kind of these three different parts. I think for us to feel better and thrive, we need to honor all three and not just rely on a single, let's say, prescription. Hormone therapy is a wonderful tool. I write for it all day, every day. I feel the way I feel in large part because due to my own hormone therapy. I know what it felt like before, but it's not the complete picture. And I would love for women to walk away from that visit with these three parts of the pie. I think just relying on a prescription again puts us in this category of dependence on an external sector and force, where the reality is the other two parts are very important also, and everything
Mhm.
works together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very helpful. And there's the mix of, like you said, your personal relationship with it, um, alongside just the amount of time and effort it takes to navigate what is a long,
Yes. Yeah.
complicated, and can be draining, especially
Yeah.
when you're already tired, you're already hot flashing, you have a
Yeah.
lot of rage, which I can.
Yes.
Um,
And I would
I don't mean
say,
to laugh. Sorry, my coping mechanism is obviously humor, but
and I
it's a
would
lot on
say
top
that
of everything else.
I also say that we need to leave that visit with the understanding that things don't happen overnight.
Yeah,
It's going to take more than 24 hours to feel better.
yeah.
You put that patch on, it will take likely some time to notice effects. And just like I would love patients to track before somebody comes in for the first visit, it is just as important to be aware and mindful of what happens once we start any sort of an intervention. What
Yeah.
happens if you change your diet? What happens if you start this prescription or that agent or, anything?
So really, kind of brass tacks, what does it look like if you leave that visit with a patch and a progesterone pill, or and then what does follow-up look like? What does good look like, or great?
Yeah. I think it really depends. I don't think the goal of the first visit should necessarily be, I need to leave with a prescription, because everybody's case is very individual. Sometimes it is pretty complex. Sometimes we need more information before a prescription can be issued. Sometimes people are unsure. Sometimes the conversation requires another visit because it's just too complicated. So, and this would be a red flag. Like if somebody is, looking at an online platform that dispenses estrogen prescriptions after, 3 minutes of filling out a survey, that's probably not super individualized care. So
I
I
would say very quickly, because there is a question about if they only prescribe pills over patches. Like
yes,
if it's a narrow
I
option.
think it's a
Cool.
narrow option. To me, that's a red
Yeah.
flag.
I teed you up for.
Yes, yeah, there's no magic, no silver bullet, not one thing to, not one way of doing things. But I do think we should leave that first visit with information and a plan. That plan may include a prescription already, but it may not. It may include, let's try this. We're going to try this type of lifestyle change for a certain amount of time. Let's reassess and see where you are next. And then in clear-cut cases, it may involve a prescription
Okay.
with,
And
again, a plan to follow up and adjust.
can we talk about also the perimenopause cohort? Because I think this is where it is oftentimes the most confusing. If you have an IUD in, but you're thinking like,
Yeah.
what does that look like if you're straddling the birth control
Yeah,
issue?
IUDs can, especially, and when we say IUDs may confuse the picture, what I mean by that is typically hormonal IUDs may confuse the picture. So hormonal IUDs, IUD stands for intrauterine devices, which are primarily used for contraception, but they can be used for bleeding management and painful period control. Hormonal IUDs release a hormone called a progestin. The particular type is levonorgestrel that thins out the uterine lining, and depending on the type of the hormonal IUD, they may influence period intensity and even period presence. So women with, for example, the Mirena IUD may not have a period at all, while women with IUDs that have a lower amount of that hormone may have lighter or less frequent periods, right? So that confuses things quite a bit. So someone with this picture, yes, it would be useful to do some hormone levels to figure out where they are because I don't have their cycle to rely on to tell me about their hormonal profiles. Um, but I think in that setting, again, in perimenopause, especially if somebody's 41 and doesn't have symptoms related to low estrogen, and even if we check estrogen comes out normal, more estrogen may not be the way to go. There are other tools and options we have. And I think it's very important to leave that visit with that plan, even if that is the case. And this is something I'll say frequently. Look, I don't think that loss of estrogen is the main issue here. It may be estrogen fluctuation, it may be something different. So before we throw more estrogen on this issue, these are the options we have. This is what I would suggest. This is how we can track, and this is how we can adjust in 2, 3, or 4 months.
What I appreciate about your care philosophy always, since we first met, is it is looking holistically. I have a friend who said we went to a menopause provider or an OB, and was the immediate kind of solve for symptoms was hormones. Then next went to a traditional Chinese medicine and said it was gut, and it can be very, gut and integrative, and taking the approach of supplements, and depending on who you go to, candidly. Women could leave that visit with a recommendation or a care plan that stands in contrast to, or if your existing primary care provider, or what happens if, I suppose, the care plan that you're provided, if your existing doctor disagrees with it? What is your recommendation to women um, to integrate this care into their existing plan, especially if it contradicts what they've
Sure.
read or their
So
existing
do
care?
you mean, let's say somebody goes on and sees a quote unquote menopause specialist on an online platform, but their primary care doctor or their regular gynecologist doesn't agree with
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
or says you're too early for hormone therapy. Sometimes, I mean, the most common here and most extreme is hormones are bad for you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
That's the
hopefully that's changing. But what I am seeing now is actually the rise in the opposite. Hormones are
mm,
always good for you.
interesting.
Even if A, B, and C, and while hormones are extremely important, and I do think that they are an essential tool in the menopause tool care kit, they're not appropriate for everyone, and they will not have the same effect on everyone. So I think in that setting where two people disagree, I think the question should be why. And I would encourage all women out there, if that is the case, please ask why. A provider who knows their way in this space should be able to answer that. And it's fine if it's a very nuanced question. I also think it's fine. And I say it a lot. I see a lot of complicated patients. I don't know everything. It's okay for them to say, I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll check up on it. Let's have another conversation. That's totally fine. It is not okay to say, because this never works, or it gives you cancer always, or because I said so. That would be the most extreme example. But I think if there is a disagreement, I would say I would ask why. And then the
Mhm.
next layer to that, in the ideal world, we all practice according to medical evidence and information and science that has been gathered. So I certainly have, especially with people who are very complicated and murky pictures, or we maybe outside of the general guidelines, there is plenty of times when we exchange actually studies looking at their particular case and situation.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Tips, going in a little bit of a different direction, but tips for navigating insurance companies, especially around the coverage of menopause hormone therapy or care.
Okay. So I would say these are two different things. One has to do with the cost of medical products, and in this case, hormone therapy, and the other one is coverage for care. So here is the really disturbing truth. Um, and I will say this as someone who is in this space now, trying to really change access and quality of insurance covered menopause related care. I really strongly believe that we can't deliver effective, longitudinal, ongoing menopause care in a single 15-minute visit. Like it is too complicated and it requires ongoing follow-up. And currently, the provision of that care is more expensive than what insurance reimburses for it. And that's really unfortunate. And it's a very systemic problem that we should really start solving by policy change and voting and advocating. However, there are, usually this care is offered through a problem-oriented care rather than a preventive care. And that is why the discussion of symptoms and issues related to this transition, whether that is joint pain, weight gain, hot flashes, sleep disruption, there should be coverage for that care under typical insurance coverage. I do think there are virtual platforms that really do this well and can offer this type of care in a from an increased access type of point of view. For cost of hormone therapy, there is certainly hormone therapy that can be very expensive, but there is lots of hormone therapy regimens that now have generics that can be much more affordable depending on insurance coverage in the range of zero to about $50 per month or so. And there's access issues also through the bigger sort of online pharmacy platforms and so on.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. And I know we're going to be coming up on time soon. It goes quickly. But maybe we could look ahead. I know we've been talking about symptom management, right? Maybe if you could walk us through what that long-term, again, good to excellent menopause care journey looks like to plan, again, not just now for the here and now, but once you've felt better, what can you expect from your menopause care team over the 1 to 5, 10 year journey?
I think, symptom management for menopause covers so many things, right? Like, and I think we won't have time to get into what does that look like for hot flashes? What does that look like for waking up at 3:01 a.m.? What does that look like for weight gain or cardiometabolic change in this time frame? So, so it's hard to answer this in 2 minutes, but I think what we should expect is some sort of a plan. So one, set expectations and not assume that all of these problems will go away and that I'm going to go back to the way I felt at 25. I don't think that's actually possible. What we want to do is feel best we can now, feel like we can do what we want to do, and actually think forward. What do I want my life to look like at 60? What do I want my life to look like at 70? And that is when the matrix comes into play again. Like, what do I need to do myself? What tools can I use to, even prescription tools that may enhance my life now and may enable me to get to my goals later. So I'll use an example here. Let's say we have somebody with a strong family history of osteoporosis whose mom or grandma had a hip fracture at the age of 65. Okay, that's a very important detail that could change how we approach that person's care at 50 in terms of the use of hormone therapy, the use of certain um, strengthening exercises, proper diet, evaluation of bone density, and all of that.
You also bring up a good point too, which is that symptoms evolve over the menopause journey, right? And it's
Sure.
important to call out that even if you've found a great plan or treatment protocol or approach, in a year's time, it's almost like, whack-a-mole sometimes. Different symptoms emerge at different times, and to expect that in advance and be able to be proactive with a care team can be
So
powerful.
I'll go back to my, favorite weather analogy these days. So in perimenopause, whatever we do, but especially with hormone therapy, it's like trying to figure out what jacket I need to wear on a given day in October. Okay, even if I put on a jacket on October 5th, there will be some days that month when that jacket will be just perfect, but some days it's not going to be enough, and sometimes it's going to be too much. And all I know is by the time November or December, obviously this applies to like, I live in the Northeast, so it applies to weather here. All we know is I'll need a different jacket come December or January. And it's the same thing for care in perimenopause. Just because we're doing something now and it's working perfectly, we evolve, hormones change, and your health, life, and needs will be different a year or two from now. So I would say like being open-minded and flexible about that is important too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for this. I know there are some specific questions around when to take hormones or progesterone versus estrogen in certain areas. These are all excellent questions to bring to your provider or your care team once you've booked it. I'm sorry we didn't get to everything, but to wrap up, I have a couple of things on our end to wrap up, but is there anything that you would like to leave from parting words to the women here today, and either recommendations or last words?
Um, yes. Okay. Obviously, we can't answer those specific questions, but if I could sort of take a big brush and say something about that. One, with hormone therapy, if someone is a candidate for it and wants to use it, we do not have to wait until we are in menopause. So you do not need to wait for a year after your last period to start that. Perimenopause, and especially late perimenopause, can be actually perfect time and maybe even optimal time to start it. And some hormone therapy types can be started even earlier. But really, what I would love to leave this conversation with, as far as kind of sharing some advice for all of us to feel better and get better care, is go into these visits prepared, do the tracking, ask yourself, consider, your own relationship and your own philosophy about these things. Prioritize, come up with a priority list if you're having symptoms about which ones you'd like to tackle first, and expect a lot during that visit. Like we do need to expect valid scientific information, listening, compassion, interest in our own health, and expect some sort of a plan, even if that plan does not include an immediate prescription.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I did not, not mean to dismiss any of those specific questions. I just know as we're kind of leaving on that really powerful message. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Dr.
You're
Barbieri, for
welcome.
sharing your wisdom. We're thrilled. I know we're just coming up with a minute left. I always learn something new every time I speak with you. So appreciate your expertise, appreciate what you're doing to advocate for women everywhere, and also what you're doing at the Rowan Center at Mount Sinai. It's very exciting to see these kind of centers of excellence where women are prioritized and cared for in the holistic way. So appreciate that. Um, with that, we'll wrap up our January menopause talk.